exasperating. We sometimes require of our children something they're not able to do. We have to be careful about this. Maybe you had a real stern parent that expected more of you than possible. Why don't we learn from that? Why don't we pass on the mistakes of our parents instead of passing on the good qualities? I don't know, but sometimes this happens in our lives. Learn what your child is capable of at the time he's capable of it, or she, and don't expect perfection from your children. After all, you're not perfect, either as a child when you were a child or as a parent. Maybe you love sports. Just to give you a rough example here. Maybe you love sports and you would love for your son, who looks like he's going to be a strapping young man, to grow up to be a great baseball player, basketball player, like I did with my 6'6" son. I never could dunk a basketball, but I sure wanted my son to. He loved to fish, and still does. Are your daughter to be a gymnast, or whatever the case may be? All of these different things that you've got this in mind because you love this stuff, and you are talented in this way. But your son, instead of wanting to be a football player or a baseball player, wants to play the piano, and is gifted at it. But isn't that kind of sissy? Well, what have you done to your child's mind there? You made them feel ashamed of a gift they have, an ability they have. Learn, and again, I'll say any parent that's had more than one child and is not completely blind will notice that your children are different. And if you had 10 children, they're all different. They have different abilities. God gave them those abilities. Every child is born with its own personality, with its own spirit that God gave them. That is who they are. You can train them in the ways that are right, but you cannot make them something they're not. And you'll frustrate them if you do, and eventually you're just going to mess up what abilities they do have. Let me tell you another way you can frustrate your children. You can expect them to be something you're not. You can expect them not to use that cuss word that you use in front of them. You shouldn't do that, but Dad, you did it, but don't be like I am. Do what I tell you. That's hypocrisy. We talked about that this morning. That's pretension. We can all be nice people here in the church building, but when we go home, we let our hair down, those of us who have it, and then we start acting in a certain way that is not compatible with the way we act here. Our children live with us all the time. They see that. They spot hypocrisy quicker than anybody will spot it. And then you're trying to say, but you need to grow up and be a good person, not like me. Not going to work. Show your children what it means to be a Christian and teach them how to become one. And always remember to love them. Sometimes love requires that you use the rod or the belt or your hand. Don't yell and scream at them. That'll frustrate children too. Why do we yell and scream at our children? Did they do something bad? Spank them. I think the yelling and screaming came from the age of Spock, where he said, you can't touch them, so just take out your frustrations, vent them by yelling and screaming at them. You don't have to be mad at your child to punish them when they deserve to be punished. Well, that's enough for you husbands, fathers. Let's talk to the mothers a little bit. We have a different world today, and I can't change it, and I feel sorry for the people that are involved in it, in the sense that there was a time that our economy wasn't based on both husband and wife working. It is today in most places. And the inflation in the world is based on that, and it's very hard for a wife to stay home and take care of the children, which is the ideal, with which often can't be done. You're blessed if you have grandparents that are willing to do that, as my wife and I were willing to do with our grandchildren, so that they got some Christian upbringing from their grandparents. And their parents, of course, loved them and did what they could, given those constraints. In Titus chapter 2, Paul is writing to this preacher in the island of Crete and giving him some instructions to give the older and younger members of the church there. For the older women, he tells them to encourage the young women to love their husbands and to love their children. And we might find that a little odd. Isn't it a natural thing to love your children? Well, again, we're not talking about affection. We're talking about doing what is right and best for them. The affection part should come naturally, even though we see today in some situations it doesn't. Love your children. Do what is right for them. And sometimes that means making them eat their vegetables when they don't want to eat them. which is just a very mild part of raising your child. You require of them what is best for them. And hopefully, prayerfully going to God, you are doing what is best for them. But love your children. Show them what love is. In 1 Thessalonians chapter 2 and verse 7, Paul gives us a picture of a mother's love and uses it actually to show how he felt, the affection he felt for the Christians in Thessalonica. He says in verse 7 of chapter 2, "But we prove to be gentle among you as a nursing mother tenderly cares for her own children." Every one of us has seen the picture of a mother holding a child to her breast. And what a picture that is of gentleness and love. My concern, dear sisters in Christ, is that because of how the world is today and what you're required to be in the world, men and women are equal, right? And you're working the same kind of jobs with the same kind of stress, and you come home, that women are losing the most precious gift they have for their children, and that is gentleness. Do your best to be that gentle person that children need. There are certain strengths that they need from their father, but there's a gentleness that they need from their mother. Okay, now you can all breathe a sigh of relief while we talk to the children. We don't have a lot of our children here today. They must have known what we were going to be talking about. But we do have some, and when I'm talking about children, it is those who are old enough to read and understand what I'm going to say, all the way up through those, no matter how old you are, teenagers, as long as you're under your mother and father's roof. There are requirements that God has for you, expectations that he has for you. And they're not hard to understand. God didn't make it hard for children to understand what they're to do to please him. Ephesians chapter 6 and verse 1 makes it pretty clear. Children, he says, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right. Now, my take on the phrase "in the Lord" there is there's obviously the possibility that you might have parents that aren't Christians, and they might tell you to do something for them, as people have done, and you probably read about. Parents have their little kids go in the store and steal something and bring it out to them. This, for children who are able to be old enough and understand, if your parents tell you to do something that's against the law, you don't have to do that. God does not require that of you. But you are to obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right. What are some of the terrible tasks you have to do as a child? And again, I'm lumping all children all the way up to, say, 18 or 19 in this. Well, let me think. You have to clean up your room. What an onerous job that is. You have to take out the trash when mom and dad say do it. You may have to do the dishes. Mow the lawn. Now, these are really terrible jobs worthy of a slave, are they not? And mom and dad require that of you. Young people, please listen to me a minute. You're going to leave home someday, and you're going to go out in the real world, and you're going to find out what work is all about and what responsibility is all about, and you're going to have to go make a check to pay for your groceries that you're going to have to cook and eat. You're going to have to make your bed then anyway. Clean up your room anyway because nobody else is there to do it for you. Do your own laundry. Wow, life is rough. Get used to it now at home by obeying your parents. Get in training for doing what you're going to have to do anyway. And be thankful that you've got parents there to take care of you and to feed you, to love you, until you get out there in the cold world and have to do it for yourself. Now think about that. Of course, here's one other little thing that God adds to it. Honor your father and mother, which is the first commandment, with a promise, so that it may be well with you and that you may live long on the earth. Things start going bad in your life after you get grown. Start looking back and thinking about how you treated your parents. And if you weren't the best child you should have been, if you didn't show the proper respect for your parents, maybe God is telling you something. You want to get your life straightened out? Then you ask God to forgive you for how you treated your parents. And then you go ask your parents to forgive you for that. And then maybe God will make your life a little better. Something to think about.